Senator Stine was born and raised in Calcasieu Parish, and while in high school, worked his way through every department in his family's business, Stine Lumber. Today, he serves as marketing director for Stine Lumber, a company with more than 850 team members and $300 million in revenue. He graduated from LSU with a degree in political science and French, and worked his way through college as a legislative aide to the Jefferson Parish delegation in the state legislature. And after graduation, he worked as a legislative aide in the United States Senate, and then as a banker in Little Rock, Arkansas, before returning to Louisiana. He and his wife, Emily, have 3 children and live in Lake Charles, and he's here today to talk about his work in the recent legislative session on the Storm Victims Insurance Reform Package and other insurance reform legislation. Please help me welcome Senator Stine.
Thank you, Karen. Really appreciate the introduction. Rather lengthy introduction bio. I'm not sure who gave that to you. We'll have to cut it down in half next time. But truly an honor and pleasure to be here speaking to you all. If I could, and I hope you're all doing well. I'm doing fantastic, by the way. Today, my kids are back in school, so that's always a good thing. I can do a little bit more work in my capacity as a state senator, but also getting back to work at the family business, Stine Lumber Company. Thankfully, we have a lot of family members who help keep that thing running. But it truly is an honor to be here. Thank you again, Karen, for the invitation. If I could just briefly touch on 3 main things that I'd like to do today is a brief background on me and how I became a state senator. Again, I've only been in office, got sworn in December, both French and English, which was fun to do. Inspired by Governor Edwards to do that. I saw that he had been sworn in as governor in French, and I thought, well, I speak French, I can do that too. But I'd like to talk briefly about how I came into office, what inspired me to run, and then switch gears to some of the legislative wins this past session, and then specifically, thirdly, I'd like to speak about my legislative wins and accomplishments that I was able to get done and proud of. So briefly about me, first off, my Senate district is 27. Formerly Ronnie Johns' state Senate district. As you recall, Ronnie Johns was appointed by Governor Edwards to be Gaming Control Board chairman, and that freed up his seat. And so I qualified for that about a year ago this time, last year, and then won election in November. And so that district encompasses Carless, Sulphur, Westlake, Moss Bluff, and most of Lake Charles. And so what inspired me to get into this race, as you recall, and I know you'll probably get tired of hearing about it, we've been through 4 federally declared disasters back home in Southwest Louisiana, in addition to the pandemic. And so we've been through a lot. And I'll go back sort of the origin story, if you will, if I could briefly. Knocking doors as a 8, 9-year-old kid for my Uncle Dennis and my Uncle Tim. My Uncle Tim was a state legislator from Sulphur on the House side for 2 terms, and my Uncle Dennis was a state legislator from Sulphur as well for 1 term, and then he became Commissioner of Administration under Governor Buddy Roemer. And so that inspires you as a young kid to do more and want to do. We, believe it or not, we hold public service in high esteem in the Stine family household, and we believe that as a former Eagle Scout to always do your best to do your duty to honor God and country, and to work hard at improving your community. And so having that background, having worked in the legislature, as Karen mentioned, in college, having worked in the United States Senate after college on Capitol Hill, really helped me understand the process and what to encounter. And also, as a public finance banker for Stevens, going around the state of Louisiana, talking to different municipalities, talking to different school boards, you really get to understand how municipal bonds work, which is the backbone of what takes place in our state, or country for that matter, in terms of infrastructure, getting things funded. But you also get to meet folks from all walks of life throughout the state of Louisiana, whether it's school boards, mayors, whoever can issue debt on behalf of their community in Louisiana. And so that was all a way for me that propelled me into this. But also a personal note, a personal story. During Hurricane Laura, I was in the parking lot of Stine Lumber serving obviously materials that we had for customers, but also we were kind of an area, a makeshift area for food. We would get a lot of food trucks and people. I'd go on Facebook Live and just invite folks to come to our parking lot, and we would cook for them. And so we literally served thousands of people out of our Stine Lumber parking lots. And if you've ever been into a hurricane zone, a war-torn zone as we were, the first thing you do when you get there is to check on your home and business. But then you forget, oh wow, there's no food or water around because you're in such a hurry. And when the power is knocked out, it's hard to find food and water when you're in that situation. So thankfully we had lots of volunteers come in and cook throughout the community, but in particular at the Stine Lumber parking lot where we fed lots of people. Congressman Luke Letlow is a dear friend of mine from Washington, D.C. At the time he was campaigning, and he would text me and check on me and say, you're doing a great job, keep feeding the people, keep up the great work. And he's someone that's always inspired me. And when I heard he got COVID, I checked on him on Christmas Day, wished him a Merry Christmas. Hoped he was doing better, and he wrote back, I'm turning a corner, just keep moving that ball down the field. And of course, unfortunately, he passed just a few days after that, but it affected me deeply. We're around the same age, have kids around the same age. And I take that to heart often is his words of encouragement of keep moving that ball down the field. And so that combined with my past experiences as a youth, knocking on doors and working in the legislature and in the Senate, really propelled me to want to do this, to do more for our community. And during the campaign, we lots of wants and needs around the community, namely insurance reform was a big one, economic development, and how can we get our region moving forward again. So that's a little bit of the background of how I came into office. Just this, swearing in just this past December. Of course, we had the special session. I won't touch on that much because I feel like I've covered that pretty extensively. Now it's sort of up to the courts for next year. But obviously, we're going to be using the congressional districts of the 5 maps we drew. The congressional district map was the most contentious, and of course, we'll be using those maps for this congressional election. And I'm sure you all will cover more of that next year. And then, of course, moving on into the regular session. It was an exciting time to be a part of this. And if I could just sort of zoom out and give you the macro view, at least what I tell folks back home when they say, what were some of the things you accomplished? And I like to talk in themes. And 2 of the big themes for me, at least, coming out of that regular session were infrastructure and education. We funded it like we funded infrastructure and education like we've never done before in the state of Louisiana, and I was proud to be a part of that. $39 billion state operating budget, one of the largest in the history of Louisiana. A lot of that due to a lot of the federal funds coming down, whether through the CARES Act or ARP. And so being able to fund infrastructure and education, look, you go across the country and you do polls and you ask constituents across the country and in the state of Louisiana, how can we get our state moving forward again? And those are the 2 main themes you'll hear over and over and over. We need better infrastructure and better education. And I firmly believe those are the 2 things that are going to move us forward as a state and to a brighter future, near future and long-term future. And so to be able to fund that, I was proud of that. And digging a little deeper, if I could, for infrastructure, at least back home, we funded out of that budget, $200 million for the Calcasieu River Bridge project. About $100 million more than what the government proposed. We were excited. Our delegation was excited to fight for those extra dollars. This bridge this is a public safety issue. The Baton Rouge Bridge is necessary. I've been stuck in traffic. Congestion is not fun, and I agree with many folks that have talked about how it hurts our economic viability in the future of the state of Louisiana with doing something about it, which I firmly agree upon. However, what we have in Lake Charles with our Calcasieu River Bridge is a public safety issue. It is rated one of the worst bridges in America. If you recall, after Hurricane Laura, an Isle of Capri barge got loose and kind of slammed into it. We had a car just recently that caught flame on top of that bridge. So it's just, I say a few Hail Marys before going over that bridge. Encourage folks to take the 210 bridge sometimes, but it's a serious matter, and to be able to get $200 million extra for that bridge, currently we're sitting at about $400 million. That bridge, as you can imagine, with inflation, those costs are continuing to skyrocket and increase. My hope is that we can fund that bridge without a toll. You'll hear from Secretary Wilson with DOTD talking about P3, and we're moving down the P3 path, which is the public-private partnership path, which means a toll. Again, our goal, and my goal serving my constituents and our delegation's goal, is to try to fund that bridge without a toll. Now, you'll also hear folks talk about a shadow toll. A shadow toll is just a funding mechanism for, hopefully it'll be a 5-parish region, but I represent, if you look at my district, all of Calcasieu Parish. I hope to, if we have to go down the P3 path, our hope is to at least have a shadow toll, meaning a mechanism that will fund folks that live there locally to not pay the toll, and they'll get a toll tag to show that they're a resident of, say, Calcasieu Parish, and being able to fund that so that the residents of Calcasieu Parish, or in particular the 5-parish region, won't have to pay for that toll. And that's, you may hear that term bandied about as the shadow toll. But our hope, again, is to fund that bridge without a toll. We as in Southwest Louisiana, the epicenter for liquefied natural gas. You've seen what's going on in Ukraine. They say it often in the headlines, gas-starved Europe. You'll hear that over and over because they truly are gas-starved. I fear for them this winter. But if it weren't for our LNG in Southwest Louisiana, they'd be in a much dire situation. And it's going to continue to get worse if we don't continue to export our natural gas. Thankfully, we have built out a lot of export facilities in Southwest Louisiana to be able to do that, not only to Europe, but we're exporting record-breaking numbers over to Asia. In fact, it's hard to believe just 8 years ago, we weren't exporting on the continental U.S. any natural gas whatsoever. In just 8 short years, we are now the world leading exporter of natural gas, surpassing Qatar and Australia. It's truly remarkable what we've been able to do. It just shows you the resilience and strength of America and our workers and ingenuity of Americans. And so proud of that in Southwest Louisiana to be a part of that, and we're going to continue. And I'm talking about LNG just to show you the macro view of how important that one bridge is, the amount of trucks that go by, and the importance of that area to not just the region but the world. Also briefly, I know y'all have covered it all, but to do $1,500 pay raise for K through 12, very proud of that. 3 of my sisters and my mom are all teachers, in addition to $750 for school support staff. So we're getting closer to that southern average. I know we have work to do on that. Hopefully we'll get some more of the local to pitch in on to getting us closer to that southern average. So we're getting close there. And of course, $84 million for early child care and education. Big proponent of that, and again, it's just going back to those 2 main themes of infrastructure and education. Looking at the mega projects, you also hear a lot about the mega projects leverage fund. Senator Paige Cortez did a wonderful job of getting that through. Those 4 projects, mega projects, you'll hear: Calcasieu River Bridge, I-49 North, I-49 South, and of course the Baton Rouge Bridge. If you look at it, it's prioritized. Thankfully, we're starting to prioritize some things here. And number 1 on that list is the Calcasieu River Bridge. And what that does is, right now, actually, Secretary Wilson is applying for $600 million in mega grants through the infrastructure bill that President Biden passed. And so we're going to hopefully hear more on that in the next few weeks on that application for that mega grants of $600 million. I don't think we'll get close to that $600 million, but I would be extremely thrilled with just half that. So hopefully we'll hear what DOT has to say about that, and they understand the importance of that bridge. So we'll know about that, like I said, in the coming weeks. And of course, able to put money back in the depleted unemployment benefits trust fund and the state's rainy day fund. If I could just go dive in real quick on, to make sure we're okay on time, to leave open for question and answer. My storm victims insurance reform package. We'd like to talk about some of my successes. Traveling the district during campaign, you hear a lot about the delay tactics from some of the bad actors in the insurance industry, a lot of what we call adjuster swapping or churning of adjusters, and that's just part of those delay tactics that they did. And so we wanted to shine more light. We want to have a little bit more transparency around the entire process and how to try to deter some of these actors from doing this, at the same time needing to keep insurance companies in the state of Louisiana. It's a fine needle you got to thread there, because you have to hold these companies accountable, and at the same time the fear is you could drive some away. So it was a challenge, but I'll just run through some of the bills that we were able to pass overwhelmingly. Senate Bill 209, which is now Act 683. It authorizes the Commissioner of Insurance to order certain penalties to persons engaging in an unfair method of competition or unfair deceptive practice. So those penalties were at $250,000 that the Commissioner of Insurance could levy. We've now doubled those to $500,000. We look back, we did get a little bit of pushback about doubling those penalties. We looked back and said, look, these penalties of $250,000 were put in place in the 80s. So I took out my trusty inflation calculator, and it looked like it was just around $500,000. So it's putting us in line of what they originally intended to do back in the 80s. And so doubling those penalties hopefully will provide a little bit of a deterrence from these actors from behaving this way. And my predecessor, Senator Ronnie Johns, appropriated some funds to perform market conduct examinations on 5 insurers that were just deemed that did a bad job received a lot of complaints, the overwhelming complaints. And so just recently, Commissioner Donilon, after these market conduct examinations were done on these 5 companies, levied approximately $800,000 in fines. And so hopefully this is a way to deter some of the things that we saw and some of the complaints that we have received. Senate Bill 210, now Act 68, authorizes fine in lieu of suspension or revocation of certificate of authority for foreign or alien insurers. This used to only apply to in-state insurers. This is simply allowing the insurance commissioner to fine companies that were out of state in lieu of revoking their certificate of authority. Senate Bill 212 creates and provides for the Hurricane Mediation Program. The genesis of this bill, if you recall, Emergency Rule 22 after Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, there were so many hurricane claims. This was a way to quickly get these claims taken care of without a long, drawn-out and costly litigation. Commissioner Donilon looked at this and thought it was such a good program that he rolled out the Hurricane Ida Mediation Program. And so we simply, and with much success of talking to Donilon and others, that we decided to codify it in a law. So it used to be at the discretion of the Commissioner of Insurance to roll this out. Now it'll be triggered the moment the governor declares a state of emergency. So very proud of that bill, and hopefully it'll allow, it'll reduce the burdensome costs of litigation and swiftly get people through the process of hopefully getting made whole from their insurance companies. We had a Senate Resolution 140. That was a bill that I ultimately pulled. That was a bill that was controversial from the standpoint of the bad, they call it the bad faith penalties. It's 50%. An insurer owes policyholder not just the full claim, but 50% of that claim. And we're gonna study to see that its effectiveness on if it's done its job in deterring some of these bad actors. My proposal was to go to 100% to double those penalties. It seemed a little much. So after talking with all sides, decided to pull that and turn it into a study resolution to figure out if these bad faith penalties are doing what it's supposed to be doing. Senate Bill 163, Act 80, it merged with my Senate Bill 232, and it simply is going to require a declared during a declared state of emergency, the insurer must send the claimant a catastrophe claims process disclosure form. We had a lot of constituents that truly weren't sure what to do. You know, we hadn't been hit by a hurricane in Lake Charles, at least in 15 years. Prior to that was Hurricane Rita. And so there were a lot of folks that really weren't sure what to do. This just increases transparency around that entire claims process. Senate Bill 198 establishes the insured provide with a summary of their policy information within a 6-month period following the assignment of a claim to an adjuster. Again, this was Senator Talbot's bill, merged with one of my bills, increasing more transparency around that claims and adjuster process. Senate Bill 264 by Senator Bowie, and I know Commissioner Donilon has spoken about this before, Act 69. This provides the minimum capital and surplus requirements for domestic insurers. Commissioner Donald spoke on this increase of capital requirements to $10 million. I think at the time he addressed the crowd and I think spoke to the media. It was 6 companies that were insolvent. It's now 8 companies that are insolvent. I think this bill will help. I think Donald spoke about how this is probably one of the more important bills. I couldn't agree more, and I was proud to co-author it with Senator Bowie. But he even touched on how the Department of Insurance needs to do a better job of regulating the reinsurance buys. And is there a way for the Department of Insurance to do that? They currently don't have the capacity, as he says it. And so I'd be happy to sit down with Commissioner Dolan and the Senate and the House and figure out a way to look over these reinsurance buys, to do a better job of auditing these companies, because I understand they just need more resources to do a better job to make sure that these companies that they have enough reserves. As you know, the more policies you write, the more reserves you'll need, and it looks like that. Not looks like it. If you look at the 8 insolvent companies, there just wasn't enough reinsurance purchased. So hopefully we can assist on that effort to see what type of resources Department of Insurance would need on that front. Senate Bill 412, which is now Act 776 by Senator Talbot, a bill that I co-authored, establishes the Insure Louisiana Incentive Program. It established it. It did not fund it. Commissioner Dolan has spoken about this before. With the budget adjustment period in December, they're going to ask for some funding. But at the time, or the genesis of this, as Donald has spoken about before, was from Governor Blanco after Hurricane Katrina and wanting to incentivize more insurance companies to our market. And this was a great way to do that. Of the $100 million offered, they were able to get $29 million that was accessed, so not the full amount. And if you use that handy inflation calculator that I talked about, that's $43 million today that we would need if we're talking about $29 million that was accessed. If you go back to the original amount offered, which is $100 million, you would need $150 million if we were to do that same sort of offer that Governor Blanco did. I'm not saying what the proper amount is right now, but judging from past, if close to $30 million was accessed last time by 5 companies, we should be in that $43 to $50 million range of being offered something during December once that application is made for the budget adjustment. It is frustrating, though, I will say, that with regards to this program, even Donald has admitted that had this not been in place, would some of these other companies come in and taken those policies off of citizens' hands, these 50,000 policies that they're trying to write out of Louisiana Citizens Insurance, would they have already scooped them up? And so it looks like some of these insurance companies are waiting on the sidelines to see if we can fund this thing. But long story short, we got to get more people here, more insurers rather, here in the state of Louisiana writing insurance. And as Donald has said, and not just him, not just me, but others in the industry, you talk to anyone, whether it's a business or a homeowner, the main crisis right now that we're seeing is affordability of insurance. And so having that Louisiana Incentive Program may help. Also, he did touch on our rate structure with companies that are domiciled in Louisiana. There are only a handful right now, and right now we've got a high rate structure for these companies, and they're subjected to these retaliatory taxes. I mean, a prime example of that is someone who was a company that was domiciled here in Louisiana decided to uproot and domicile in Washington, D.C. And it was because of these retaliatory taxes that we're subjected to that they up and moved. And so if we want to increase competition and we want more folks, more insurers here in the state of Louisiana writing business, we've got to look at the rate structure. And I'm looking forward to that next fiscal session to work on that with both sides of the aisle, both chambers, and with Commissioner Donald. How can we reform our rate structure so that we have more competition in Louisiana? Lastly, I'll just mention House Bill 682. It merged with my Senate Bill 330. It establishes the adjuster database. I've mentioned my history of public finance banker. We have something called the FINRA broker check. So, in fact, you can still go on there today and see my name and whether I have any ethics violations. But it's very transparent. I don't, by the way. It's very transparent of a tool of researching these bankers and knowing what exams they pass, whether there's been any ethics violations. It's a very transparent tool. We don't have that in the adjuster industry. We had complaints about the entire industry on the transparency around it. And so this database will hopefully clear up a lot of that. You'll be able to see their work history, how long they look. We understand that these insurance companies, this was unprecedented. 800,000 claims, $24 billion that was paid out. Truly unprecedented. And so there was a shortage of workers. I can speak to Stine Lumber. We had a shortage of workers, so I understand the insurance companies had a shortage of adjusters. And so a lot of times a lot of these adjusters were just being hired on the job to go adjust someone's home with, frankly, not a lot of expertise. And boy, wouldn't it be nice if we had an adjuster database that shed light and had more transparency around that process. And so that's what that does. I will, before I turn to Q&A, just lastly, not insurance, but two bills that I'm proud of. Is Senate Bill 450. This is with regards to microbreweries. This is going to allow microbreweries to transfer beer from one microbrewery to another microbrewery owned by the same microbrewery. Previously, you couldn't do that. You can now do that. That's important. And not just for microbreweries across the state, but specifically in Southwest Louisiana, there's a microbrewer that is looking to expand, and this is going to allow them to not just open up, but hopefully be successful. And you look at some of these arcane laws on the books and you kind of scratch your head. I couldn't imagine owning a lumber company, one in Sulphur and one in Lake Charles, and if I run out of 2x4 8-foot treated pine at my Sulphur location, if the law said, sorry, you can't transfer that same 2x4 8-foot treated pine from Lake Charles to Sulphur if you're running out of some of those 2x4s. Thankfully, we can transfer that, and that's just kind of enabling that microbrewery to do that. And then Senate Bill 424, Act 776, is going to remove burdensome requirements for boating rental business. It's going to help boating rental businesses across the state of Louisiana, in particular several in Southwest Louisiana. Folks who've all been to Florida to rent that pontoon boat or that jet ski or up and down the coast, you simply show them your license, you take a quick safety course, and you're on the water within an hour or two. We had it to where if you were born after 1984, so a 38-year-old, if they tried to rent that same pontoon boat, they would have to wait an entire day, but also take a 2 to 3 hour course online. It was just extremely burdensome. This puts us more in line with those coastal states, allowing us to compete. It's going to help businesses back in Southwest Louisiana, I think, across the state. So I think I covered a lot. Apologize for that, Karen. But thank you again for having me, and we'll open it up to Q&A.
I was recently out in your area of Lake Charles, and there's still several businesses and homeowners that are, fighting with their insurance companies. It's an issue in Southeast Louisiana where there's extreme delays in payments, and people are still not able to get back to their business and back into their homes. Is there any kind of legislation or work you're doing with Donalyn to try and address that issue?
Thank you for that, Shannon. Great question. Look, there's nothing more symbolic. You were in Lake Charles recently. Nothing more symbolic than driving on I-10 and seeing what I call the Calcasieu Marine Bank Tower, now the Capital One Tower. It's owned by the Hertz family, the Hertz Group. Nothing more symbolic than seeing a boarded up building. It's the tallest building in Lake Charles. Technically, it's Golden Nugget now. I think they just slightly went over that height. But nothing more symbolic than seeing plywood all boarded up of a tower that you see right there on I-10. And the reason why it's still boarded up and work has not begun is because of delay of these insurance companies and fighting with Hertz on what the proper amount is. And so to answer the question, Doug, there's nothing that we've been able to do to force companies' hands into paying. However, you look at some of the things that the bad faith penalties, things of that nature. You drive around Southwest Louisiana, you've seen plenty of trial attorney billboards, right? And so that's sort of been the hammer to try to get them to the table. But there's no clear-cut, easy solution. Now, as I said at the outset, it's a fine needle we're trying to thread of forcing companies to do the right thing and to deter them from doing it again, at the same time not being too heavy-handed to where it scares up all the competition and we only have Louisiana citizens writing insurance, for example. So nothing direct other than some of the things I've mentioned here, and then hopefully bringing them to the table and they'll pay out whatever they pay out.
Is it, am I correct, is it Friday's 2-year deadline to litigate these?
I believe it is. I have to double check, but
Yeah. Do you see that is there kind of like a line out the court?
there is. There's a mad rush. Yeah, it's funny. You'll run into folks the last week or two. I've run into several people saying that deadline's approaching. I'm just going to file because they're throwing their hands up. Lenny. So to your point, there has been that not. You'll see that in Southwest Louisiana, but you'll start to see that once it happens back in Southeast Louisiana. But look, a lot of this legislation we've been able to get accomplished, not on my end, but on the Senate and the House side. You know, if you recall, Hurricane Laura and Delta hit almost 2 years ago. Last session, there was a little bit that was done to help the situation. I mentioned Senator Ronnie Johns funding that market conduct examination, but I would argue a whole lot more was done this session with regards to insurance reform, and that's mainly because we had more partners across the state of Louisiana, namely Southeast Louisiana, being hit by Hurricane Ida, which surpassed the number of claims and dollars amounts that Hurricane Laura had. And so that if there is a silver lining in all this devastation, it was having those partners across the state of Louisiana to help and assist with some of these efforts that we've accomplished.
Have you identified any sources of funds for the Insure Louisiana Incentive Program? Is there, a pot of money that's out there that y'all have found might be useful for this?
Thank you, Melinda. If there were a pot of money during the session, I'm sure we would have found it and funded it. As you know, we authorized the program, we established the program, we just didn't fund it. Talking with folks in the House and the Senate, the goal is to now look for the appropriate amount of dollars. I kind of outlined, 50 million, maybe 100 million, looking at years past, or last time we did it rather. But that budget adjustment come December, you can expect to find, I would imagine, an application of funds for that Louisiana incentive, Insure Louisiana Incentive Program.
But you don't know which pot of money are you looking for in that December?
I do not. No.
Thank you for being here, Senator. When you talked about the Calcasieu Bridge, it seemed like you talked about some concern about the funding level of the infrastructure. Are there certain obstacles that you're concerned about that would bring us to getting more money instead of less money?
Say that last part.
Are there obstacles in there that you think would put us in a position to have less money out of infrastructure rather than more money?
Sure. The main obstacle is the 49 other states. We are all fighting for that same pot of money. The $600 million that Secretary Wilson is requesting on that mega grants is not unreasonable. I think if you look at Mobile and other areas across the country that are in dire need of a new bridge, it's in line with that. But the main obstacle is fighting for dollars. I think I've heard Senator Cassidy say that of this infrastructure bill that was passed, Louisiana got the third most in terms of roads and bridges, dollar amount for roads and bridges, which when you look at, Louisiana as a state, we're 4.6 million people right in the middle of the pack. So to be, if indeed that number is true, that we're at least third in terms of getting those dollars from that infrastructure bill, I think we're in a great spot. With regards to the mega grants application, again, we're just fighting with other states across the country to pull down some of those dollars. Hopefully we'll get close to that $600 million mark.
Senator, can you tell us where
For the new I-10 Calcasieu River Bridge, it'll be just north of the existing bridge, right there, crossing the Calcasieu River. There's arguments on how high that should be. If you look just north of the bridge as you're going over it, there's, I believe, only one company that needs it at a particular height, and so we'll be looking over the coming months whether it's possible to lower the height. Again, I need to go back and check with Secretary Wilson what the plans are currently, but you can imagine if you can perhaps lower the height of that bridge, it might be able to lower some of the costs. And so, look, we're going to do everything we can to try and lower the cost of that bridge. Finding more dollars and lowering the cost is our goal.
So you were talking about the shadow poles.
Sure.
So is the goal or the idea to the residents in Calcasieu and around to like pay a one-time fee for the special tag? We give them unlimited access to the bridge and then everybody else just pays as they use it, or how would that work?
So, again, the proposal we're hearing, there's nothing set in stone yet, but if we end up having sort of a pot of money, there's been various proposals bandied about. One would be pulling down some dollars from local sources in addition to the vehicle sales tax that currently is going to be through that mega projects leverage fund that I talked about. Some of that vehicle sales tax is going into a pot of money there that Calcasieu River Bridge will be able to access, and so maybe setting some of those dollars aside to help pay for this toll tag for residents of, again, the 5 parish area of Calcasieu, Cameron, Jeff Davis, Allen, and Beauregard is sort of what we floated out there for the residents of that 5 parish region, and so you would access those dollars from a combination of local funding sources plus some of the dollars that we're receiving from that vehicle sales tax. Does that kind of answer some of what Melinda's always got a follow-up.
I always have questions and nobody else is coming. I was going to ask about Insurance Commissioner Jim Donald's performance in light of the storms and all of the insurance struggles that the state is seeing. Do you think that he has used all of the tools at his disposal appropriately, and do you think he needs more flexibility in what he can do to respond to some of these things that we're seeing?
Sure. Look, Commissioner Donald has been insurance commissioner since before I was born. Just kidding. That was no. I say that only jokingly. I had the pleasure of working with him briefly in college as a legislative aide. When I was in Jefferson Parish delegation, he was on the House side. So I had the pleasure of working with him then, have the pleasure of working with him now. My goal as a state senator is to work on solutions. And so I felt that we had a wonderful session, this past session, working with all parties, from insurance industry to the trial bar to, and that's, by the way, Melinda, that's what kind of gets lost in this whole conversation at the end of the day is the person in the middle, which is the policyholder. And so having those frequent conversations with constituents back home is important. But to fairly and best represent my people is to not point fingers at this point. It's to find working solutions. And so I'm willing to sit down and work with everybody. And again, look, he's got a lot of experience as commissioner. And so I'm going to lean on that. I'm going to lean on the folks that he's surrounded himself with in the Department of Insurance. They do have a lot of experience. They see what's taking place across the country. And so I'll continue to lean on that experience. At the same time, holding folks accountable, and in particular some of those insurance companies that we were able to do this past session.
Senator, is Calcasieu Bridge part of the interstate system?
It is.
Are you aware of any place on the interstate that has a toll?
That's a great question. So during session, that was often repeated, like you can't toll an interstate, a bridge that's on the interstate system. And so we looked into it, and 16 bridges are actually, or not bridges necessarily, but 16 areas across the country on the interstate system do indeed have tolls. However, from California to Florida, where Interstate 10 runs, there is no toll. And so we don't want to be the first from California to Florida to have a toll right there in Lake Charles. And again, we're going to continue to redouble efforts to avoid a toll at the very least, try to get that toll paid for our constituents and residents of Southwest Louisiana.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Karen. Enjoyed it. Thank you all. Thanks.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't know Tim so well. Sure. Tim's my godfather. Okay. You and Paul Ringland? Yes. That's great. Thank you, lady.